All right, welcome everybody to another edition of Deconversion Stories. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of talking with Miss or Mrs. Is it Miss or Mrs.? Mrs.
Miss or Doctor.
Doctor. All right, Dr. Marlene Winell, sorry.
Winell.
And she is the author of Leaving. Is it Leaving Faith? Is that what it's called?
Leaving the Fold.
Leaving the Fold. That's right. And where it's a book about helping people deal with leaving religion behind and stuff like that. Now, I have a question. Are you involved with the recovering from religion stuff?
Oh, the organization, you mean?
Yeah. Or secular therapy, I think, is another one that they're in deal with.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. I also have links, by the way, guys. If you are recently deconverted, sorry, and you are seeking some help with that, there are links below to all those types of things: the Secular Therapy Project, the Recovering from Religion, and also the Clergy Project as well. Mm-hmm. They're great organizations to help people with stuff like that. So anyways, Marlene, what I do here is I talk to people about how they left their religions and their journeys away, the impacts that it had on their lives and stuff like that. And I'd also like to get into what you're doing now with the retreat and how you're helping people deal with that sort of thing. So why don't you take us on a little bit of a journey, and we'll talk about the other stuff.
Okay. Well, I was a missionary kid. My parents were Assembly of God missionaries in China and Hong Kong and Taiwan.
Wow.
I was born in Hong Kong and grew up in Taiwan, went to a missionary boarding school, and I was very serious about my faith myself, too. It wasn't just my parents.
So would you say you were somewhat of a fundamentalist?
Yeah. Evangelical, charismatic. When we came to the States, I was 16, had my last 2 years of high school in Southern California, and was a real Jesus freak.
Now, do you speak fluent like Chinese and stuff like that?
I speak some Mandarin Chinese. Yeah, it's not that fluent anymore.
Oh, okay. Well, that's kind of like my Hebrew. When I lived in Israel, it's not so fluent anymore because there's not a lot of people around here that speak Hebrew. So I get it. Yeah. So tell us, like, how did you coming out as an atheist? How did that affect the rest of your family and stuff like that?
Well, I think my parents and siblings were pretty disappointed in that everybody else in the family is still very much in the religion, and some of my siblings are now missionaries.
Wow.
So, not only did I become a psychologist, which is kind of anti-Christian,
yeah,
because psychology has very different explanations for things.
Yes, of course.
But then I wrote this book, which is about recovering from religion, especially evangelical Christianity.
Like the trauma that's involved and stuff, I guess.
Yeah, and it explains, what a lot of the issues are, what kind of damage religion can do, and then what kind of steps you can take to recover. So, yeah, my family hasn't wanted to talk about that a lot, but that's okay.
No, did they still did anyone sort of kick you to the curb when that happened, or you're still involved with your family and stuff?
Well, early on, when I thought it was still something to talk about, I used to try to explain why I had left and what some of the issues were, but it always turned into arguing. So over the years, I kind of gave that up, and we've reached more of a agree to disagree kind of situation where we still have contact, but we're not close. It's pretty hard to be close when you're so completely worlds apart from each other philosophically.
Absolutely. I agree there for sure. I have some relatives of my own that have sort of grown a little distant ever since I basically came out and told them that I just didn't believe in this stuff anymore. I was raised in the Jewish faith myself. However, I was born to Christian parents who were too young to keep me very staunch Catholic. So that was, back in '66, that was pretty taboo, right? Out of wedlock. So I was raised in the Jewish faith, and I would say probably up until my bar mitzvah, I was somewhat of a believer, but after reading the books, and then I read the New Testament, I read the Book of Mormon, I read all this stuff just to sort of understand religious belief in general. And that's what kind of started me in the direction of getting away from it myself. Would you say that something like that would be a similar thing? Like when you were reading the books and you start to get to know a little bit more about this alleged deity and his behavioral patterns, was that one of the things that sort of led you away from believing?
Yeah, I studied the Bible for one thing very thoroughly, and then all the things that and books about the Bible. So, and I wanted to understand it for myself, and not just have it be a hand-me-down religion and blind faith. So that started in high school, and then in college, continued my intellectual search for what was true and what wasn't, and finding out a lot about the Bible was pretty shocking, you know, and stopped believing that it was the Word of God. And then in college, you take a lot of course subjects, you know, psychology, anthropology, history, literature, you know, and you open up your mind to a lot of new ideas, and you realize that the world and others are not necessarily as crazy or stupid or evil. And there really are other ways of thinking about things. There really are other worldviews that are coherent and not evil. So I think that my religion was a combination of pushes and pulls, you know, getting disenchanted with the beliefs and the Bible, and also issues with the church, the patriarchy, you know, the hypocrisy, and then the pulls being people outside and activities outside, including having a love relationship with a boyfriend that was a real person. Kind of broke my addiction to being in love with Jesus. Yeah, that's really important. And then in psychology is all has a lot to do with the way you relate to other people. So you're not just concerned with a vertical relationship with God. That's not the whole thing.
Right. I have actually somebody in the chat right now that is asking if there's a way to contact you. Her name is Celine Fredema, and fairly recently out of the faith herself. So,
well, if you go to my website, journeyfree.org, you can
link is below.
Yeah, you can. When you get there, you can click on a button that says book a consultation, and you can have a free consultation with me. Just go there and find a time that's good for you.
There you go, Celine. Yeah, hopefully, because I've spoken with her a few times, and I think she could definitely use your help for sure. I do plan on having her on the show at some point too, but it probably won't be until the new year after I start season 3 up, because I'm pretty much booked. Excuse me. So what made you decide to become a psychologist in the realm of helping people deal with religious trauma?
Well, psychology was fascinating to me because it was all about what makes people tick, you know, so that just kind of changed my whole world. And then finding out more about how to actually help people was pretty satisfying.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I'm going through my deconversion. And I wrote something about that, what I thought some of the impact of that was, what some of the psychological consequences were of leaving a faith like that. And then that evolved into a paper that I gave at the APA convention, American Psychological Association in New York. And much to my surprise, a lot of people were interested in it and relating to it. And so I continued asking, when I went into practice, I would ask clients about their religious history, which is actually unusual for a lot of therapists. They don't ask about that. They ask about family.
That's true.
Education and illness and alcohol. They ask about lots of things, getting to know you, and they leave out religion, which is super important.
Sure. I think it's a fundamental part of who people are, really.
Yeah, and it's not true that it's simply a benign thing. That people assume that it's a good thing, that helps you, or that it's harmless.
Hmm.
And that's not necessarily true. So I was finding out more about that, and then interviewing people. I started interviewing people, not just from evangelical Christianity, but also Mormons and ex Jehovah's Witnesses
Yeah.
and so forth, and finding out a lot of commonalities and realizing that I could put this together in a book and try to tell some of these stories and point out some steps in recovery,
Hmm.
drawing from that. So that's what I did. I did a book proposal and pretty quickly got a book contract because there was nothing like that around.
Right. That's fantastic. That's one of the reasons why I want to pick up that book, is I'm sure there's lots of stories that you've got in there of people leaving that I'm very much interested in, which is basically why I started this channel to begin with, is to hear these stories and hopefully that they help people, that might tune in to watch something like this, that are, fence sitters or having doubts. And I think just knowing that there are other people out there that are like that, and that ultimately were able to leave safely, comfortably, for the most part. I've spoken to some people who are having issues with family, especially from like ex-Muslims and stuff, where some of them are now afraid for their lives and stuff like that, right? So
Yeah,
it's just sad. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think these stories are important. So kudos to you for doing the book like that, because I think the more people that read these, the better off it'll be, I think, in the long run. Anyways, I think religion's slowly on a decline in a lot of places anyways.
Oh yeah, this country, that's for sure.
Yeah. And personally, I don't want to insult anyone, but I think that that's actually a good thing. So, because religion can be quite harmful. I mean, when you think about some of the people that get into positions of power to legislate against basic human rights, that's I have big issues with.
Right.
So, as I'm sure you do as well, yeah. When you were in college, would you say that, because I hear this quite often, when people end up, they're still sort of kind of believe but don't really believe, and then they end up in college and that's it. It's like all the dominoes fall from that point on. Just talking about these kinds of things with other people that they engage with in college, or courses that they take where they're a little bit more, shall we say, scientifically based kind of thing. So would you say that was one of the more how do I put this, like the part that kind of really started to make those dominoes fall?
Yeah, I think so, very much, because you get away from your parents and your church, and you start learning to think for yourself and realize that that's okay. You can ask questions, and just the quest for knowledge, for real knowledge and real world information and science is pretty alluring and pretty exciting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I agree. That's why I'm a chemist. That's fantastic. I think once you get in there and you see, you take these courses and you realize that all this stuff was, well, for lack of a better term, withheld, I guess, when you're in the belief system. Because, let's face it, religion and science don't exactly get along most of the time. Because, the scientific way or method has a way of demonstrating that what's been printed in these ancient books is way off base. So, like, we're not it's not a geocentric universe. The earth isn't flat. There's no firmament over the earth with water on the other side, that kind of thing, which we've discovered over time.
Right. The biblical cosmology is quite primitive.
Yeah, indeed. I would say, knowing how our solar system formed, well, now anyways, I would say if you had to pick anything that would be kind of godlike, you could pick Jupiter and Saturn, the two biggest planets in our solar system, because without the two of them, we wouldn't even be here. So it's because of them that we were able to come to life, so to speak, on this world. How did you when you did you take any courses on things like evolution, stuff like that? And if so, how did that affect uh, your thoughts on what you were taught in beforehand?
Well, I didn't take a course specifically on evolution, but I learned about it,
Sure.
and um, just in the course of taking science classes, to find out that there is such a thing as scientific method,
Mm.
and how completely unbelievable the creationist story is. Um, it's it's reassuring to know that there is another whole way of looking at it
Hmm.
and try to understand it in a natural way. I mean, I would call myself a naturalist now, which
Sure.
is meaning that I have rejected a supernatural point of view. I think, and what we're still in awe of and don't understand. These are not miraculous things, but just things that we're still learning about.
Sure.
That's perfectly fine.
Yeah, well, I agree. Um, growing up hearing these stories as well, and I didn't. It was funny because I remember going to what we called Hebrew school, and I remember asking my teachers, I said, "This, they're reading the old biblical stories about David and Goliath and
Hmm.
Samson and all that stuff," and I'm like, "This
Hmm.
stuff just sounds like mythology to me."
Uh-huh.
And I got kicked out of the class for saying that. So,
You got
uh,
kicked out. Wow.
well, for the day, of
Uh-huh.
course, my parents spoke to them and said, "Oh, let him back in. He's just an inquisitive child," we'll say, right? So,
Uh-huh.
yeah, but and I guess it was at that point, even which was pre my bar mitzvah. I was already sort of questioning just because of the validity of these stories. Just seemed well, they just seemed ridiculous to me. So,
Hmm.
but I stuck with it because when in Rome, I guess at the time, and I was too young to move out of the house. So,
Hmm.
but
Well,
eventually,
that's the thing. When you're a kid, you don't have any choice. You get born into an
yeah,
environment,
yeah,
depending on um, the how devout your parents were, your family was. You get born into an environment that you don't have any control of, and you don't get told any alternatives. It's not like they say, "Oh, this is your free choice," and sit you down and offer you an explanation of Judaism and Christianity and Islam and Hinduism, and then say, "What would you like?"
yeah.
You
No, I
know,
didn't get that.
nobody does that. Nobody does that, and yet um, they'll end up saying that believing is of your own free will,
Mhm.
and that God wants you to love Him because you want to.
Right.
But what choice do you have as a child? And you get told all these things, especially the frightening things like going to hell.
Mm.
To be told that when you're 4 years old, and to have that vivid imagery printed in your mind, um, is something that can follow you for the rest of your life and be scary even when you intellectually don't believe it at all.
Sure. Yeah, I agree for sure. Um, I should have had a thought and it just went out of my head. I hate it when that happens. Um, no, it's gone. It'll come back to me. But anyways, let's talk about this retreat that you have now. Um,
Mhm.
give us a little bit of a detail about what it's about, and if people are interested in checking it out, where can they find it?
Well, again, go to journeyfree.org.
Oh, I've lost your sound.
Can't hear me?
Oh, now I can. Yeah.
Okay. Um, Again, there's a button on the homepage that says retreats, and you can go there to read about it. And then, if you're interested in talking about your particular situation, your story, and are curious about whether this would be a good idea for you, just go ahead and book a time to talk to me, and we can discuss it and see what your options are. We also have an online support group that
Cool.
has video conference calls twice a month. That's a community for folks that are deconverting. And then there's individual consultation. But anyway, the retreat is in January 17 to 20. It's Martin Luther King weekend,
Mhm.
and it's here in California in the Bay Area. People,
Beautiful city.
huh? Yeah.
Beautiful city.
People come to these retreats from all over, including other countries. It's I've been doing it for about 15 years.
Wow.
Once or twice a year, we've had a lot of different people. Although each retreat is a small group, it's anywhere from 12 to 15 people.
Okay.
So and we all stay in a big house.
Oh, yeah?
It's like a 3-day slumber party.
Actually sounds kind of fun.
It is. We have a lot of fun. One night we have a talent show one night, which is
awesome.
We have a lot of music. We have great meals. We have cooks that come in and cook for us that have been to previous retreats. So people get to know each other. You get to tell your story and get some support, get understood for a change.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because people usually have the experience of not really being able to talk about it because people that are still in the religion don't want to hear about it because they're just going to want you back.
Mm-hmm.
And then people who've never been religious don't get it. They don't understand what the problem is or how it could possibly be traumatic. You know, why don't you just get over it? Is kind of their attitude. So it's great to have some time with folks that do get it. And then we go through a lot of exercises that are very healing and growth producing to help understand what you've been through, and then also strategies for getting better and finding out that that's quite possible for everything to get better.
Oh yeah. I remember now what I was going to say. I have a friend who recently came out of quite a religious belief system, a version of Christianity. And she was so happy to be free from it for about at least the last year and a bit. And then recently, she was listening to a couple of gospel-y type songs, I guess, or religiously based songs. And now she's gone back to the religion. Have you heard of things like this happening before?
Gone back to the religion?
Yes, she's now, and she talked to one of her cousins, I think, or an aunt or something, and they managed to convince her to come back into the faith with the safety of God or whatever she had put it. Have you heard of that happening before? Like, have you ever had to deal with someone that ended up doing that?
Well, it's rare because usually people can't really go back even when they want to because they know too much.
You know? Right. That's kind of what I was saying to her. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean you're going back?
It's like finding out there's no Santa Claus. You can't really go back.
Right.
But there are attractions in the religion. There's a community, there's music, there are things to do, activities. There's and the community is really important. Sometimes you don't want to go through rejection by your family.
Yeah.
And also the things that you have to do to really heal and reconstruct your new life are challenging. You know, you have to take responsibility for yourself. You don't have, you're not just looking for God's will all the time. You have to make your own decisions, and you have to reconstruct some kind of meaning in your life. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
And the religion, which defined everything, it defined who you were. It defined what the world is, what other people are, what the future holds, everything about the past. It did everything for you like that. And now you've got kind of a blank slate where you have to figure out what some of those things are and what your new approach to life is going to be. So there is some work involved.
Oh,
and
yeah,
sometimes
absolutely.
People do have a hard time. The problem is that when people have a hard time and are going through a lot of pain, they can mistakenly interpret that to be like the Holy Spirit drawing them back.
Sure. And I think that's pretty much what's happened with her.
Yeah. So, God calling you back into the fold.
And exactly how she put it.
Right. And what that is actually, it's an interpretation of some of the feelings that you're having. Right. and it's not the Holy Spirit at all. But you can see it that way and go back into the cocoon if you like. But for a lot of people, it doesn't really work. They might try that for a while, but it doesn't really work.
That's kind of what I'm hoping.
Yeah.
She's a good kid, right? And she, for the longest time, I had her on my show too, and we did this little deconversion chat with her as well. And for the longest time, she's like, yeah, I can't believe this anymore, yada, yada. So that's why I was kind of shocked when I got this big, long text of message from her on Facebook that she had gone back. And I'm like, what? How do you do that?
Yeah.
But someone in the chat had a great question that I think I would like to ask you.
Okay.
Do you feel that religious trauma syndrome should be added to one of the mental health disorder classification systems?
Well, I do. Naturally.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people would say it's like a special case of complex PTSD.
Okay.
Post-traumatic stress. But it deserves its own name because there are a lot of things about it that are special, that are different from other kinds of trauma. So that's why I gave it a name. Having a name, I think, helps people feel like they're not alone. You're not crazy. It encourages people to do research on it and encourages training in psychology programs and more knowledge about it because it's a known thing. So I think we're getting there. I'm seeing more and more interest in it and writing about religious trauma, even in academic circles as well.
Wow. What's your take on people that want to label religious belief as a mental disorder? I'm against it myself, but do you think that there's any substance to that?
I don't know that you could define all of religion that well as a mental disorder, just because it's so broad. I think that there are aspects of it, like delusions. There's delusionary thinking in it that are really serious, and things that people do that are dysfunctional psychologically, like shutting down their thinking to and being other oriented, like subservient to authority, where they're no longer trusting their own thoughts and feelings. These are things that we would consider mentally unhealthy and immature, in clients. So I think you can break it down that way.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. Yeah, there's certain aspects of it that we could consider more in that realm. But, ultimately we look at, how that sort of thing starts to happen. And really it's the indoctrination process. And that can lead to
very early.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Extremely toxic things about some of the teachings. The other one, besides the hellfire thing, or that the world is a dangerous, evil place, is the attitude you're taught about yourself. You're supposed to consider yourself basically bad, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't need saving. So you develop this extremely degrading view of yourself as being empty, as being unreliable, as being unintelligent, and you have to reach outside yourself for everything good. Everything good you do is because of God. Everything bad you do is your fault.
Right. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I'd like to think that me starting a Partners for Life group, blood donations, was all done by me and not some entity nobody can seem to see. Well, I try to do, I always tell people, try to be the best version of yourself that you can be. always remember to help people that are in need, that kind of thing. And I don't think you need anything deity wise for that to be a thing. Although many people who are believers might argue that. They say that one of the biggest issues I have is that morality can only come from a God. And I think that that's just utterly ridiculous.
No. And there's plenty of research on that too.
Sure. Oh yeah. And I've pointed that out, but they hand wave it away most of the time. Seems to be the big trend is the whole, post all the evidence you want. I'm just going to ignore it. It's almost the Dunning-Kruger effect or something.
Yeah.
Well, how many of these retreats have you done so far?
I've lost count. It's somewhere between 15 and 20.
Wow. And have you ever had anything kind of go awry at any of these things? Like people that have shown up that were not exactly people or something like that?
Nothing really destructive. I have had maybe 2 occasions where people left early because they just really didn't want to deal with the issues.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That seems, that kind of makes me ask in the back of my head, well, why would you go to this to begin with if you're not ready to deal with it?
Just not knowing what you're up to, but they are very, very supportive. And one thing I say to everybody is there's nothing you have to do at a retreat.
Right.
If there's an exercise that you don't want to take part in, that's fine. And in fact, if you want to go for a walk or take a nap or whatever, it's totally up to you. There's no pressure. And I mean, the only rule we have is mutual respect. People can have different opinions. It's fine. And the nice thing is that people can say what's on their minds.
Yeah, for sure. Sounds like it would be a really interesting thing to be a fly on the wall at. That's for sure. Just to come in and see.
There's actually a documentary coming out next year about these retreats.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's awesome. I'm going to have to add that to my collection of documentaries. I have quite a few, like the Unbelievers and a bunch of other ones, A Better Life, that kind of thing.
Well, this was made by a couple of Swedish filmmakers who came over. They attended 2 retreats and did a lot of filming and then did a lot of interviewing of people that were there.
Oh, really? That's great. Pardon me for one second. That's better. Now I can breathe again. Yeah, I've had this silly cold now for going on almost a month. And it's just clinging on, and I can't seem to shake it. So pardon me if I blow my nose once in a while here. Okay. I'm trying to kill it with the beer, but it's just not working. Well, I follow you on Twitter, but I don't really see much activity from you on there. And I just sent a friend request on Facebook as well. Because I would like to keep in touch with you because I think Courtney and I would love to have you sort of talk about the whole retreat thing again on our show as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'm still a bit of a novice on social media, I'm afraid. And Courtney's actually helping me.
She's good people, Courtney, and we live fairly close to each other. We're in the same province here in Canada. And
and I should mention that one of the other things that I'm doing more of is consulting with therapists. Who have clients that are recovering from religion and are needing some guidance about how to work with them. And I'm going to be starting a support group for professionals that can talk together about their cases.
That's great. Is there quite a few people that that do this, I guess, this type of psychology, dealing strictly with people that are suffering from religious trauma?
Well, they don't necessarily um, specialize in just those clients, but there
Mm,
are more and more therapists that want to work with this population. And so, I suggest different things. I suggest that they come to a retreat. In fact, at this next retreat, we're going to be having some discussions between sessions for the therapists that are there to talk about why we're doing what we're doing. Because everything at a retreat is very carefully thought out.
mhm.
It's not a random series of events. Uh, it's and having done it so many times. So I'm happy to share that with whatever therapists are there. And usually therapists that are interested in working with these folks have been through some of it themselves. That's why they're
Sure.
interested. So there's usually some growth and development there as well.
That's great. Um, I think it's a necessity, and it's going to be more and more of a necessity as people seemingly are more and more leaving religion and beliefs behind.
Mm-hmm.
So, especially if they come from something that is a lot more fundamentalistic, like evangelical type stuff or missionary type stuff.
Uh-huh. Or
So,
Orthodox Judaism.
or oh yeah, yeah. You know, living there in Israel, I lived there for a couple of years, and sure, at that time I was sort of the fence sitter when because I was in my teens. I did grade 11 and grade 12 over there.
Mm-hmm.
But just wandering around Jerusalem during a holiday there a holiday called Purim,
Uh-huh.
where it's pretty much everybody gets drunk and forgets who everybody is, and then they hand out food and presents, and it's all crazy stuff. And they dress up so that you can't recognize each other, sort of their version of Halloweenish kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
And I got to tell you, even though they're quite fundamental, my friend of mine and I were walking down one of the alleyways in a place called the Shuk, which is like the Arabic market that's in Jerusalem, and they had this little hall off to the side, and this Hasidic Jew ran out and he grabbed my friend and I and dragged us into the hall, and he gave us some food and he gave us some wine and he pushed us into the dancing circle. Although we may not agree on our beliefs, they're sure fun people to party with. That's for sure. I can tell you that for sure. Experiencing it firsthand, it was a lot of fun, and living there was a bit of an eye opener as well, because you'd expect there to be a lot of religious people in the land of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
But I found that a lot of the people that I became friends with, whether they were Arabic or Israeli or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of them are quite secular. They weren't really overly religious.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of struck me as an odd thing. I mean, you could even go to, kashrut law is like the kosher foods and stuff. You could still buy pork products in Israel. And I found that just blew me away right away, because I didn't think that they would have that sort of thing there. But there is definitely a hardcore religious people that live there, but there a lot of the outliers, I don't think that's the right word, just basic citizens really aren't overly religious. They're more traditional. They still do the holidays, but there's not a lot of religious talk unless you are in with people that are quite religious. So that kind of took me by surprise.
Yeah, it's good to know.
Yeah, but still a couple of the best years I've ever spent were there. There's definitely culture shock for sure. And it's funny when you go to a country that's full of people that have had to fight to be there, and then us Canadians and American privileged kids show up there, and we get picked on quite a bit. But eventually they warm up to you, and you end up with lots of friends there and stuff like that, because they realize, you know what, we're all just people. So that was kind of interesting.
That's great. You had good experience.
I did. A little bit of military training as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's my phone going off. Yeah, we did something called Gadna, which is where they send you for a couple of months and to this military training sort of thing. And I think the best part of it was after all the training, they put you and a couple other guys out in a little Jeep and they drag you out into the desert and they go, okay. Well, they blindfold you first. And then they drag you out into the desert and they give you like a day's supply of water, a day's supply of food. Now you got to hunt and find your own water and find your way back to where they took you from.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, we were the two other guys and myself were the first ones back. So we kind of won that contest. So I was pretty proud of that.
Wow. Survival training.
Oh, yeah. And I even I was this close to being stung by an Israeli golden scorpion, and they can be lethal if you don't have the but luckily, I saw the little bugger at the last second, so I didn't put my foot in my boot because they like to do that. They'll hide in places like that.
Well, it must be kind of interesting to you, what the archaeologists have found in the last couple decades. You know that there was no wandering in the desert for 40 years.
That's right.
In fact, there was no departure out of Egypt.
That's right. And there's even more to that now that they've discovered. They uncovered little villages, I guess, around these pyramids where they were little huts where people were living, and these little round things that they now believe were where they would make wine or mead or beer in these little things for their own selves. Like it's almost as if people were recruited to build the pyramids for the pharaohs, and their families were taken care of. All this stuff has come to light recently. So there were no technical slaves at all.
Oh.
They were all people that were like, I don't know, contractors would be a more accurate word. But it was mandatory to go and work for the pharaoh, but everything was taken care of for you. So nobody was being whipped like the depictions that we see in the biblical stuff. And that's why I guess, one of the things when we do our Passover Seders, because I still go with the family because, might as well. It's good food anyway. And we all have to read out of the book. They call it the Haggadah, which is the book that tells the story of Passover. And they talk about all. And now my sister gives me these little dirty looks every time I start rolling my eyes. So, but we have a mutual agreement. She knows that I don't believe that stuff. And I had a discussion with her husband one time about the validity of the whole story because of what they found out. Like there's just no evidence for it. Hell, there's not even evidence that Moses ever existed, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
And so we've had a few going back and forth there, but the good thing about him is we can have these little disagreements or discussions or debates and still get up, smile, shake each other's hand, give each other a hug and say, see you next time.
Oh, good.
Right. So hopefully I can, convince him, but I don't, though. He wanted to be a rabbi at one time. So this is a tough one.
Yeah. And people believe what they want to believe, don't they?
Yeah, that's true. Well, they often say, it's funny because I don't think we technically choose our beliefs. We're either convinced of something or we're not. So, but when you grow up in it, I think that convincing that happens, you don't really have a choice in. It just happens because, well, why would my family lie to me? They're telling me all this stuff is true. So I guess I believe it. Yeah, which I find really kind of, I don't know, just harsh. I don't want to say it's child abuse, but sometimes, and some of the stories I've heard, I would definitely label it as child abuse, especially the part you were talking about where they're threatening 4-year-old children with hellfire. I think that's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's abusive.
Yeah.
I think it's also abusive to destroy a sense of self.
Yes.
Self-esteem.
Yes, I agree for sure. And that's technically what that does, is it can take away that sense of self for sure, because now you aren't really you. They almost teach you like you're nothing without God, which is is it's not good. If it can, it's almost degrading in a sense. My friend Randolph Richardson has shown up. Hello, Randolph. Him and I are also going to be putting a show on as well, but it'll be more to the tune of the Atheist Experience, where we'll have people phone in to talk about beliefs and stuff like that. So,
Oh, good.
Should be a good one. All right. Well,
I might also mention that there's a conference in April 27th, I think it is, 26th. Conference on Religious Trauma, CORT, in Vancouver.
Really? Here? Wow.
Is that where you are?
Yes, I am in Vancouver. Well, I'm in one of the part of the Lower Mainland called another city called New Westminster, but literally I could be in Vancouver in like 15 minutes if I jumped in the car. It's just up and over the bridge and we're there. So, wow, I didn't know that. I'll look out for that because I'd like to probably check that out. And I'll probably drag my friend Randolph.
There's a website, Court 2020, CORT 2020.
Court 2020. Okay. I'll
and it's the first conference really that's about treating religious trauma. I mean, there have been plenty of atheist conferences, but this one is the first one to be about recovery. I'd really like to sit in on something like that. I could probably, hopefully they'll have a Q&A and I could probably get up and talk a little bit about some of the stories that I've heard as well, just doing what I do. That would be really, really cool. Yeah. So I'll see you there because I'm going to be there. I'm one of the speakers and we're also.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Yeah. And, San Fran and Vancouver, we're not so far apart. We were out for coffee one night, a friend of mine and I, and he goes, you know what? I hear this Hard Rock Cafe is a really great restaurant, and the closest one to us is San Francisco back in the day. Mm-hmm. So we were like, well, let's go. So we jumped in the car and drove all the way down there, straight down there just to go there. And we showed up at the Hard Rock, and the lady says, well, we're closing in about 15 minutes. And I'm like, well, we just drove all the way from Vancouver, British Columbia. So do you mind if we come and have a quick bite? She's like, holy shit, no, we'll keep the store open for you. And they came in and they sat us down, which was pretty cool. I even kept a menu, but I don't know where the hell it went. It got lost in one of my moves. And I ended up with two because my friend went to the Hard Rock in London and brought me a menu back from there too, which is kind of cool. But anyway, what do you say we wrap this up?
Okay.
Is there anything else you would like to chill out, so they say, before we wrap this up and jump into a little bit of an after party?
No, I can't think of anything else.
All right. Well, thank you, Marlene, very, very much for chatting with me today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's been great. And guys, if you are interested in what Dr. Marlene Winell does, there are links below. Definitely check them out, and I highly recommend picking up a copy of her book. You can get the Kindle version or the Amazon version. And I didn't see anything for it, Marlene, but is there a audio version?
There's no audio version. Okay. There is a workbook, a free download on the website for a workbook that goes with the book, where you can do the exercises, because it really is a self-help book. It's not just something to read. It's something to actually provoke you to try some things.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Yeah, very cool. Well, it looks like my moderator extraordinaire has already been pumping your links into the chat. Thank you, Inquisitive Quandary. All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. We're going to have an after party. If you are interested in jumping in for a little bit and saying hello to Marlene, just let me know through Twitter and I'll give you guys a join link. I do know that Courtney, aka Godless Mom, will be wanting to jump in as well. So I will have to have a space for her because she's very excited to talk with Marlene as well. So give me about, let's say, give me about 10 minutes and then I'll have a fresh link for you because I got to go and take care of a little something here. Okay. And then, we'll get it going.
All right.
Marlene, again, thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome.
And as I always say at the end of these things, guys, before we jump to the after party, remember what the late, great Christopher Hitchens once said. It's called faith because it's not knowledge. And we'll see you guys next time.